will be presenting the viewpoint of the pharmaceutical industry on generics, patents, and the developing world. In this very brief presentation, I hope to dispel a few misconceptions on the industry, as well as the impact on generic drugs in providing future care for the world's most crucial health problems. I will also provide a few possible solutions on how to resolve these issues that serve to benefit everyone. To start, I will speak a little on the pharmaceutical industry as a corporation and its image with the public. The corporation is an easy target. It's hard to empathize with a faceless entity, considered an individual mainly for tax purposes. And it's even easier to despise and even hate an entity that is supposedly making millions in profit on the suffering of others. Not surprisingly, this is the fate of the biotech corporation. In an attempt to demonize the pharmaceutical industry, it's easy to overlook many of the positives that the industry brings to everyday Americans. As of the latest Bureau of Labor Statistics report shows, the pharmaceutical industry is one of the fastest growing manufacturing sectors in the United States in terms of hiring Americans. And these statistics show that are not even considering that the manufacturing stage of the product, not the research and development stages. Taking into account the massive R&D output, the suppliers and the tangential suppliers, this makes the pharmaceutical industry one of the largest American-based, American-owned, American corporate employers. Furthermore, the pharmaceutical industry is also known for supporting the arts and sciences by offering scholarships, mentorships, and sponsorships to benefit students everywhere. Yet people continue to view the pharmaceutical industry as a two-dimensional caricature of what it actually is, which is an active community member. And so, what do they do? In particular, people remain fixated on the belief that African children are dying solely because of corporate greed by the pharmaceutical industry, and that the best way to fix the system, and perhaps punish this, is by promoting generic drugs at the expense of the pharmaceutical industry's patents. South African children are dying from disease, not to mention poverty, war, malnutrition, government corruption, inefficiency, and a host of other problems. And this is not only a tragedy, it's a blatant injustice. However, increasing generic drug availability at the expense of patents, which seems all the more popular these days, is not the best answer, nor does it resolve the problems plaguing lesser developed countries either. The literature for and against patent protection of biotechnology is comprehensive. There is undoubtedly strong emotions regarding the plight of South African victims from both sides of the table. And it is clear that no one, absolutely no one, not even the evil pharmaceutical industry, wants people to die. Also, no one wants to rob the other of his or her fundamental rights either, a la Robin Hood's popular but morally questionable, steal from the rich and give to the poor either. So I'm going to forego the emotional blackmail and focus on the practical. What is the best way to help the victims in the most effective, efficient, and fair means possible? Because of this, I will try to refocus the debate on less charged grounds, namely economics. The first place to tackle this enormous issue is the appeal of generic drugs. Easy enough. The answer is its price. Generic drugs are the chemical equivalent of their branded counterparts and cost a fraction of the price. The question that logically follows is, why? Well, generic drug companies don't have much overhead cost. They merely piggyback off the efforts of others. Generic drug companies don't, one, have to spend millions upon millions on research and development, including dead-end experiments that yield no product and absolutely nothing. Two, they don't have to run clinical trials on drug efficacy and safety either. Three, have to run and to recruit the most brightest minds to their labs and pay enticing enough salaries to keep them. Four, they don't have to raise awareness of the drug to the medical community and persuade them to take a chance on this new product either. And five, they don't have to worry about, most importantly, recouping the costs of these research and development processes. This provides generic drugs the ability to slash prices dramatically and still remain fiscally solvent. For a moment now, consider this perspective from the biotech corporation. Having spent millions and years of hard-won research, been rejected by the FDA scores of times, burned through millions of dollars in labor, infrastructure, and equipment, and on the verge of becoming called upon to provide a return on the loans made to fund these projects, you have a new drug. You were successful in gaining a patent for 20 years, and in those 20 years, you have to make up for all the ridiculously large expenditures you've incurred and be able to have sufficient profit to seed your next experiments. Economically, there are two ways to raise money. One, you can sell large quantities over a large period of time for low prices. Two, you can sell at a high price for smaller quantities for a shorter period of time. And this is where generic drugs come into play. The biotech corporation has a very limited patent shelf life, yet it knows as soon as the patent expires, the market for its product plummets because the availability of cheap generics. Consumers are not stupid. Think about it. And are not going to pay for a pretty brand name when identical, cheaper alternative exists. The biotech corporation cannot afford to compete with a generic drug company since it has to consider its very heavy cost burdens. So while you, as the biotech corporation, would love to sell your product for pennies upon the dollar, you can't, and also make ends meet. The other alternative is to sell at a high price during a short time frame. To help with the spur sales, the company has to engage in somewhat irritating habits, such as marketing directly to consumers. They can't afford not to do so. Reducing patent life, while noble in theory, can cause problems in practice. In the scenario in which patents are reduced, the biotech corporations now have even less time than ever to recover their expenses. From here, there are two possible scenarios. The corporation can raise the prices even more to make up for its lost time, or it can stop innovating. If the corporation becomes to the point where it can't sell its product at a really, really high price that even the most desperate person wouldn't even want to pay for it, there's really no incentive for them to start innovating. And without the initial sweat of the brow, there would be no generics, and society at a large would be worse off. So what does this have to do with the developing world and orphan diseases? Orphan diseases are an example of what happens when the biotech corporation cannot afford to feasibly do the necessary research for a particular illness. Yet rather than foisting generics, which show some problems here and there, on the corporation prematurely, when it does complete such research, a better means would be to work with the corporation. Instead of fighting and demonizing the biocorporation, why not seek mutually beneficial arrangements? And we have started such essential partnerships through public-private sector alliances where governments offer financial assistance and tax relief for corporations dedicated to finding cures to lethal diseases and selling them at tiered prices. In tiered pricing, the biotech corporation takes a page out of the airline industry's playbook in that it sells its products at a higher price in wealthier nations and at lower prices in poorer countries. The industry would sell based on the ability to pay, and this is what Roche is really doing right now in Africa for influenza, and to great success. Another possible solution is a virtual pharmaceutical company, also known as a VPC, which sidesteps some of the financial problems by having participating corporations specialize in the areas of research and development process instead of having fragmented, overlapping research from individual companies. The VPC, therefore, can access a wide range of expert technical resources to meet specific needs. The VPC itself is highly flexible and responsive to changes since it does not depend on itself to tie itself to failing research and the desire to force a sellable product out of itself in order to ensure that the company can recuperate costs. Funding the VPC tends to come from private foundations such as the Rockefeller Foundation, which also direct the course of the research. And some current ongoing VPC projects include researching vaccines for AIDS and tuberculosis. In the AIDS example, the VPC called the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, the IAVI, contains some of the most prominent philanthropic donors in the world, such as the Rockefeller Foundation and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The private sector pharmaceutical industries that take part include Wyeth, Alphavax, and Chiron, which is an amalgamation of small and large biotech firms. However, it is clearly stated that the patents go to private partners. IAVI stipulates prices and the use of technologies. The main benefit of the VPC is that some of the financial burdens on the pharmaceutical companies disappear, allowing the companies to take on orphan diseases. Not surprisingly, the VPC is beneficial for the biotech firms, both large and small. Smaller biotech firms have the opportunity to partner with larger firms as well as receive the venture capital to begin their research. Large biotech firms receive excellent public relations and are able to do their research in areas where it's less feasible financially. Many of the companies involved keep their patents on their processes and their contributions to the cure, but the cure itself would be available at a very reasonable price. Everyone wins in the scenario. Public gets a cure at a low cost. The companies are doing research they've always wanted to do. Philanthropic foundations achieve goals for helping the public, and all of it was done while maintaining intellectual property integrity, an important aspect for spurring innovation and giving individuals a tangible hold in the fruits of their labor. This is a value so important that the framers of the U.S. Constitution enshrined it into the very first article of that great document. The overall conclusion is this. Generics seem like a good idea, but they are not the full solution to the overall current health crisis. Over-demonization of the pharmaceutical industry, while morally satisfying in a sense, does not accomplish much compared to working with it to find sensible solutions that benefit all. With the right partnerships, it is possible to ensure that the tragic nature of our global health can be resolved without sacrificing our values.